Okay, we're off to the races. Hope nobody's gone today. Let's see. I'm missing a Jamesy and an Abdul so far. All right. Well, what do we got to tell you this morning? I said you didn't have to get the test signed, so I'm not going to look at those. You did have the progress reports going home. You're not supposed to be looking for a signature on that either because your parents were told that they were coming home, so we won't worry about that. Next thing is I do have a couple of you guys that aren't going to be watching the movie with us. Didn't turn in permission slips by Friday, and that was the limit. So you're going to be asked to step out. We're going to go over the film with everybody else who did have a permission slip in on time. You will not hear anything that's really testable. I am going to give you a verbal description of what's on the film, which you will be here for, but you will not see the video thing. It's about, I forgot, it was 8 minutes long, something like that. It's not a huge thing. It's just enough to really show what a battle looks like. I think you get to feel a little bit more from the pictures from the video than you could from my descriptions. I think we will probably end up doing that because we have to wait until we get to the Battle of Petersburg. I'm thinking probably Wednesday is when that's going to happen. Today, matter of fact, probably it just started, I just dropped a minute or two ago, or will very shortly. Your next set of notes is dropping down into Google Classroom. I timed it out. And so that dropped like the quizzes do. That'll be down there. What do we got today? Let's do some notes. Why? Because Riley loves, oh, wait a minute. I believe we have a notebook check coming around here, don't we? Okay, Abdul, did you check in at the office? All right, good man. So pull them out. I just want to see the ones for these last two.
Oh, well, I don't have that one, but I have.
Why don't you have that one?
Because I forgot.
Oh.
I probably.
Oh, bummer. That's homework, guys.
I did.
What's in the meeting? We're going to do that today. Okay. All right. All right, let's take a look at this note. You rolling? Okay, cool. So we got the rack, Zoe, and arithmetic. Let's talk about Chickamauga. Let's all say it. This is fun. Chickamauga. Chickamauga. Okay. Woo! Now you go down and get some grits and feeling food. All right, Chickamauga is in Tennessee. It's September 19th to 20th, 1863. This is not, for a change of pace, the Army of Northern Virginia versus the Army of the Potomac. This has got two other generals you might not have heard of, and the one on the left there is Braxton Bragg. He was quite a general out in the West for the Confederacy, and unfortunately, he was one of the Confederate generals that was not good. He earned the nickname the Southern McClellan because he also didn't feel he was quite ready, and he didn't dedicate his resources at the time that they were needed. Hold back, hope for resupply, get some more guys, then I'm ready to go. And he actually did quite a good job of attacking the Union here, but then he didn't follow up. Yes?
Wait, was he a good training general too? Or was he just like...
He wasn't known for that. He's not quite like McClellan. He was just more of his shortcomings. All right, so at Chickamauga, the Confederates came in and they routed the Union. The Union was just running off the battlefield, and then this guy on the right, General George Thomas, he earned himself a nickname. General George Thomas became known as the Rock of Chickamauga. And this is the guy I talked about very early when we started describing the Civil War and brother versus brother. This is the brother from that Virginia family that had a lot of sons, who was the only guy who went north. And this is the one whose mom turned his picture around. She couldn't stand to look at her Yankee son because all the rest of the family were Confederates. And after he became this hero, he stopped the Confederate charge and held the line so that the Union could regroup. They still had to fall back, but at least they weren't being routed anymore. They could withdraw orderly. And so he earned that name, the Rock of Chickamauga. And Mama was so happy that at least he was a hero that she turned his picture back around. Okay. So, I was at the Chickamauga battlefield not too long ago, and they were talking about with the heavy wooded area and all of the cannons going off and everything, that as they built the fortifications, getting ready for the battle, it actually was one of the soldiers saw an officer flip a coin because they built a wall, but they were so confused with the fog of war, they weren't sure where the enemy was. He flipped a coin to find out which side of the wall he was going to put his men on. But he didn't know if the enemy was over there or over there, but at least they had a wall to go behind. Okay, what else have we got here? Let's talk Gettysburg Address.
Oh, can we?
We can.
Oh, yeah.
All right, you do not have to memorize this. You do need to know something about it. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a copy of this. We're going to read through it. Gettysburg Address is very short. It's only 10 sentences. Took Abraham Lincoln a couple of minutes to read. It wasn't long, but it was very impactful, and it changed the reason the North was fighting the war again. Remember, the first reason was preserve the Union. The second reason was end slavery. That changed with the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, this is a third reason, changes with the Gettysburg Address. We'll fill you on that. If I can just, all right. Listen down a little bit just so my glasses are sitting on my thing. The Gettysburg Address. Now, what happened was this. Abraham Lincoln was not a very popular guy at this time. The war had gone on. So many people had been killed and wounded that he was not a popular president. Abraham Lincoln's popularity shot way up when he was assassinated. He suddenly became almost a saint in American ideals because it was like he gave his life to end the sin of slavery. He was actually shot on Good Friday right before Easter. But at this point in time, coming up to his second election, it didn't look good for him. What happened was this. Here was this giant battlefield at Gettysburg, and they had had so many casualties. I mean, just thousands of casualties. And they were all over downtown, and they were all over people's farms and fields and in their front yards. They said, well, we can't just leave these people. We can't bury them where they fell, or we'd have graves all over. We wouldn't be able to use our fields. So what we need to do is take an area here and turn it into a military cemetery. We're going to bury all of them here. And when that finally had happened and they cleaned up all of these bodies and put the area back together, put this military cemetery there, they said, well, we need to have a dedication ceremony. We need to send this thing off and memorialize these people. And so they said, okay, who can we get for a speaker? And they got a man named Edward Everett. Edward Everett was a very famous speaker. And remember, again, speakers of the day did not have the benefit of having microphones and loudspeakers to boom out their voices. They simply had to learn to speak very loudly. And they also, because some people a few rows back wouldn't be able perhaps to hear them quite clearly, they had to use exaggerated movements. So, alas, I was sad. These kinds of things. And they'd use their big booming voices. Hamza, you need to close the computer. We don't have enough class. Okay?
Oh, it wasn't me, Mom.
Okay, it's all right. Still flip close. All right, anyway. So Edward Everett came and they said, okay, we've got this famous speaker. This is going to be great. And people back then, man, a speech was a spectacle. They expected people to speak for a long time. And they said, geez, it's the National Military Cemetery. The guy's the commander-in-chief. This war just kind of wrecked our town, but I suppose we have to invite Lincoln. We have to at least, pretend we want to hear him. So let's invite Lincoln and hear what he has to say. And so Abraham Lincoln came up, and he spoke these 10 sentences. It took him a couple of minutes. And here's what happened. With Edward Everett, he spoke for slightly over 2 hours. Big booming voice, exaggerated movements. And people thought, wow, this guy's good. Oh, woo! This guy's good. And then literally after he sat down, we're kind of saying, man, did you love that? I love this thing. That was kind of cool. You know, that was a good movement. Some of them missed Abraham Lincoln speaking because they hadn't come back to paying attention again, and he was already sitting down. So it was kind of an amazing thing because they expected him to go on for at least a couple of hours himself. And here he gave this tiny speech, which was not well regarded by some. They thought this is kind of an insult. 10 sentences, what's going on here? For others, it was kind of monumental immediately. When he sat back down, he was sitting next to Edward Everett, and Edward Everett said, I wish I had come as close to the point of this in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes, because he realized what Lincoln had said. So let's take a read through this thing. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. 87 years ago. When's that?
47.
What? How many?
Would it be 47?
No. What's the score? What's the score?
Wait, wasn't it like
Wait a minute. What's the score? Simple question. What's the score? How many years?
26 something?
Well, what's the score?
4?
No.
Is it 20?
It's 20 years. So 7 years ago is how many?
87.
87. Subtract that. This is given in 1863. What year is he talking about?
1776.
1776. Okay. That's when the nation was founded. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives, that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannad hallow, hallow means to make holy, this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, no long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. What's the last full measure of devotion?
Death.
Death, their lives, they gave their lives. What we hear, that we hear highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. There's still a war going on. He was looking at an election versus George McClellan. George McClellan would be the Democratic candidate in 1864, and he had promised, McClellan had promised, that if he were elected, he would seek an honorable peace, which probably meant letting the Confederacy go, which meant, what did these guys die for? If the fundamental reason to hold our country together, we don't even follow through on that? Okay. That this nation, under God, shall have new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. All right? He's saying, look, here's the way it works. We have a republic, and we vote people into office, and these elections give people power. Well, what happens if some people say, well, I didn't like the result of that election, so I'm going to break off and become a separate country? Do we have a country at all? Would we have a country? I mean, think about it. So let's suppose that the 30-odd northern states go off and say, okay, you guys can go away. You Confederacy can go away. What happens next week when New England says, you guys aren't moving fast enough on the slavery thing for us over here, the territories we still consider. So New England, we're breaking off and becoming a separate country. We're going to be the United States of abolitionism. And what happens if out in the West when California says, yeah, you know what, we're kind of our own thing. We got this kind of Spanish background, and now we're going to become the United States of California. Maybe we'll throw Texas in there too, because we're kind of Western. You wouldn't have a country is what Lincoln is saying. You have elections, majority rules. The people get to decide who's going to rule, what rules are going to be made. Minority right, majority rule, minority right, hugely important. The majority rules, the minority has the right, and the right they have is to try to change the mind of the majority, to try to get a few people to come in on their side. Think about the last couple of presidential elections. Donald Trump came in, the Republicans came in and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And the majority of people said, okay, let's do that. This is great, fantastic. And then somewhere along the way, the Republicans lost some of the people that they had for backing in their election. And so what the Democrats were doing, they were using their minority right and saying, hey, but we would like to do this, and we would like to do that, and we would like to do the other thing. And some of those people said, well, okay, let's shift over and do that now. And now we have Joe Biden for president. And you'll see in 2 years when there's a congressional election, maybe the Republicans will make a comeback. Maybe the Democrats will get stronger. We'll see who can convince the people to keep them in the majority. Okay, so what the third reason for the North fighting is, first reason was keep the country together. Second reason to change with the Emancipation Proclamation was to free the slaves. Only place on earth you're going to get this written down, Hamza, is right now in this class. Remember how you didn't have the notes down? This will be where you need to have the notes down, okay? Third point, so first point, keep the country together. Second point, free the slaves. That changed with the Emancipation Proclamation. Third point would be with the Gettysburg Address. He said, we are fighting for a Republican form of government. We're fighting for a Republican form of government. I will say it one more time. You need to focus right now and do it.
What are we supposed to take? What is this for?
This is what's on the test, honey. This is how you get the material for the test. I give you the rough notes, which need to be in your notebook. Then you need to add the materials that's not in the notes to make sure you have it for the test. Otherwise, if your notes aren't thorough, complete, and accurate, then they don't do any good to study from them. So one more time, the first reason the North fought was to preserve the Union, to keep the country together. The second reason, which changed with the Emancipation Proclamation, was to free the slaves. The third reason, which changed here with the Gettysburg Address, was to defend a Republican form of government, that this thing could survive. He says right there that lots of countries don't believe that a country so conceived and so dedicated could long endure. When the United States became a separate country, almost all of the European countries said, they'll be back. They'll just be colonies again before you know it. They'll become a territory of Great Britain because people can't govern themselves. It takes a king to rule them. And so here he's saying, look, if this thing breaks apart, it's been 87 years, then yeah, I guess it looks like people can't govern themselves. It looks more like, what, do we need a king here? We need somebody to keep our country together? All right, cool. I also put this up here just to show you guys why sometimes drawings can be so much better than photographs. This looks all very dramatic and wonderful. This is the only actual shot of Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address. He sat back down too quickly. So he's already down again. And here's a lovely picture of the top of his head.
Yeah.
Probably on his lap. Okay. All right, cool. So after Chickamauga, the Union fell back and they were kind of pinned down. Braxton Bragg got them that far. And they say, help! Send us some more people. We need some more people. Every once in a while, the military will come through with a lot of help. A lot of help. When I went to the Citadel, which is a military college in South Carolina, when I went to the Citadel, I had an Army instructor named Captain Sawtell. He'd been a lieutenant in Vietnam. You don't have to know the story, it just tells you sometimes you can get a lot of help. And so he was out on patrol in the jungles, and his patrol was attacked by a whole lot of North Vietnamese. And so they were being shot at, they were pinned down. So he gets on the radio and he says, okay, I need some help. I need some artillery over here. And they said, no, I'm sorry, our guns are all dedicated to firing for somebody else. So he couldn't get any help from the artillery. So he said, called the Navy and he said, I need some ship to shore. I need you to shoot some things from the big guns on the ships. You got to hit over here. We're being pinned out. We're going to get killed. And he said, nah, sorry, we're all dedicated batteries for the next couple of hours. We're all shooting for somebody else. And he said, we're as good as dead. I mean, this is terrible. this voice comes on the radio. Most people don't know this, but actually the Australians were our allies in Vietnam. It's an Australian bomber. And the guy says, "Good day, mate. I've got a couple of bombers here, and our run's been called off. Can I do anything for you?" And he says, "Yeah, could you drop your bombs at this coordinate?" He gives him the coordinate where the bad guys are. And again, you hear the big, and you hear just like in the movies. You know, the bombs coming down, and so they ducked and said, and when the bombs hit, these are heavy bombers, when the bombs hit, he said all of them went like 15 feet in the air, then back down again because of the percussion of the bombs. And he said, so when all the bombs were done exploding, he looked up and he said, not only was there no enemy in front of him, there was no jungle in front of him. He was looking at an open field for a good distance. So sometimes the Army sends a lot of help. What they did this time was they said, okay, we got Vicksburg, so leave a garrison down there, and then Grant, you go up and bring the rest of your army over and help these guys. So Ulysses Grant shows up, and he is going to take charge of Chattanooga. That'll November 23rd to 25th, 1863. And he comes up with a plan. The Confederates are up on this place called Missionary Ridge. This is up near the top. You can see this is kind of a serious place they have to run up. The Confederate cannons were there. There were fortifications at the bottom of Missionary Ridge. There were fortifications at the top of Missionary Ridge. So Grant comes up with a plan. Okay. Here's the ridge. Down here, there are fortifications. Up here, there are fortifications. So the Union's going to come running across here. First guys he sends are guys from Wisconsin. The guys from Wisconsin are supposed to take this. And then while they're taking this, guys from Michigan are going to come running past them, run up the hill, and the guys from Michigan are supposed to take this. But the Wisconsin guys have this 19-year-old colonel named Arthur MacArthur. His son would be Douglas MacArthur, the five-star general that ran the Pacific Theater in World War II. Well, Arthur MacArthur there, he's a Wisconsin guy. So they come in, the adrenaline is going, blood's boiling, these guys are pumped. And so they capture the bottom of Missionary Ridge. And then Arthur MacArthur screams, the guys from Wisconsin go take the top of the two.
Charge.
He screams,
Charge.
Don't take the top of it too.
okay. He's a colonel from Wisconsin and he screams,
Forward. Onward.
ah!
Forward. Onward.
Cheesehead.
On Wisconsin! He shouts on Wisconsin and the Wisconsin guys go take the top. So the next time you hear on Wisconsin, that's what that is. That's Arthur MacArthur, Missionary Ridge.
I've never heard
Okay, all right. Oh, they named the street after Zoe Johnson. Look, Johnson Avenue or Johnson Street.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
But no parking on that side of our street, please. Okay, what else have we got? Lincoln finally says, wait a second. Oh, hang on, go back to the West. Halleck was an idiot, but this is the guy that was winning battles. Now, my guys over here were pinned down, and they send this guy, and boom, we're winning. This is the guy. Finally, Abraham Lincoln realizes this is the guy that should be commanding my armies, and he promotes Ulysses Grant to be the commander of all the armies. You're in charge of it all, baby. Get it coordinated. How Robert E. Lee on the Confederate side had Stonewall Jackson as his right-hand man. Well, Ulysses Grant on the north, this was his right-hand man, William Tecumseh Sherman. Yeah, just like the Indian. William Sherman. William Sherman is the right-hand man for Grant. So he says, all right, I gotta fight this whole war. That's too much for one guy. So let's divide this. Grant's in command of everything, but he says, okay, I'm going to be over in the east, Virginia, down there. He sends Sherman out to the west and say, I want you to take that side of the war. Yeah.
Sherman, like the general that the tank was named after?
Yep. That's him. Okay. Ulysses Grant realizes there are two ways to win a war. Now, what the United States has been doing to this point is what you see on the left. Destroy the enemy's economy. To destroy the enemy's economy means they won't be able to continue to fight. They can't supply themselves. And we've seen this to be true, right? They're stealing the clothes on shoes off of dead Federals. Their money's fairly worthless. This is working. This is the Anaconda plan. But it's been going on now for 3 years, and Ulysses Grant says, okay, time to slow this thing down. We're time to speed this thing up. Let's get this war over with. The other way to win a war is to kill the enemy's army. Just kill them all. If you kill the army, they can't fight. They don't have an army. So, 2 ways to win a war: destroy an enemy's economy or destroy an enemy's army. The North will continue to do the Anaconda plan. They'll continue to squeeze the economy, but Grant now says our job as soldiers is just to kill Confederates. That soldiers, they're not going to go kill grandma up on the porch. Yes.
In that graveyard thing, why is there like all those small ones, but then a big one? Why is the...
It's probably either, I'm not familiar exactly, I can't read it, but it's probably either a unit, if they were all part of one unit, or it could be some higher ranking officer. Okay. All right, cool. So let's talk the arithmetic of war. It's very simple. Ulysses Grant realizes I've got a lot more people than my enemy does. So I need to kill soldiers. And the only way to kill soldiers is to just get there and fight every day. Kill people, kill Confederates every day. And even if I lose more soldiers than they do, I'll lose a battle. But I'm still winning the war because they are going to run out of soldiers before I do. So I need to just continue fighting. So here's his plan, to use the arithmetic of war. And that is, if one side has far more soldiers than the other, even if they take heavy losses, they will still win the war. The other side will still run out of soldiers first. So he said, all right, Sherman, I want you to go out west. I'm going to give you an army of 100,000 men. And I'm going to put an army of about 40,000 on your right side and another army of about 40,000 on your left side. That's 180,000 soldiers. And I want you to kill Joe Johnston's army. Now you're going to do this by heading toward Atlanta, because I think he'll come to defend Atlanta, but I don't care about Atlanta. If he gets on a boat and goes to Africa, you get on boats and go to Africa. If he goes to Canada, follow him to Canada. If he goes to Chicago, go to Chicago. If he goes to California, go to California. Just keep attacking and killing his army. Sherman's now got 180,000 men. Joe Johnston had about 60,000. So 3-to-1 advantage. And remember we talked about after Pickett's charge, they can't replace the Confederates. They can replace the Union soldiers. So as Joe Johnston's army gets smaller and smaller and smaller, Sherman will still have 180,000 men, even if he's losing a lot of soldiers. Okay, George Meade, who beat Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg, he's still in command of the Army of the Potomac, but Ulysses Grant is going to travel with the Army of the Potomac. And face it, Cha-Cha is the manager of this McDonald's. But the district manager is going to put his office in Cha-Cha's restaurant, and he's going to come down and see what's happening all the time. So who's really running the restaurant? His boss, the district manager, because he can't really do anything independently. So George Meade is still in name in command of the Army of the Potomac, but his boss is telling him what to do, and his boss is standing right next to him. So really, it's Grant running these things. He said, okay, Army of the Potomac, 120,000 men. Again, I'm going to put 40,000 on your right, 40,000 on your left, and we're going to head towards Richmond, because I think Robert E. Lee will defend Richmond, But remember our goal, I don't care anything about Richmond. Richmond could stay, fall, get blown up, survive, I don't care. All I want to do is kill Robert E. Lee's army, every single one of them. Then we will win the war. Okay. So you got Sherman coming from the west towards Atlanta, but his goal is to kill Joe Johnston's army. And you have Meade and Grant coming from Washington, D.C. towards Richmond, but their goal is to kill Robert E. Lee's army. The beginning of the end was May 4th, 1864. That's when Grant had coordinated so that all 6 of these armies start to move on the same day. Now think about that. You've got 180,000 men on one side, 200,000 on the other. That's 380,000 men moving against a total of 120,000 men between the two armies. Yes, sir.
Is this less than 72?
Is this less than 72?
71.
71. Okay, 72 coming at you shortly. All righty, cool. Oh, yeah, you want to say it. All right, good. Now, you can pull out your computers, get out your notebooks, take the notes off of Google Classroom for the next lesson, get them into your notebook. Your next quiz/test will be Monday the 5th. Be there.